All right, we ready to go? All right, let's call the regular meeting. This is actually the May meeting being held on June the 1st, 2020 of the Town of Abingdon Planning Commission to order. A portion of the members, the record will reflect, are appearing by or through Zoom meeting, and a portion are present. I'm going to ask Mr. Boswell to call the roll, and as each answers, if you will note for the record whether they are personally present or appearing by computer here today, please.
Mr. Sproles,
Here in person.
Mr. Anderson,
Present.
Mr. Wilson,
Here via computer.
Mr. Bradley,
Here by way of computer.
Mr. Schuman,
Here.
Mr. Austin.
I'm present personally.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boswell. The last minutes of a meeting that we have are those of February the 24th, 2020. I believe that those have been sent to all the members of the commission. I trust you've had an opportunity to review those, and I'll ask if there are any changes or other modifications to those minutes.
I did not see any, and I'm willing to move that they be approved as submitted.
All right.
I'll second.
Second. Any additional discussion to the motion to accept the minutes of February the 24th, 2020? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I've signed those, and I'll pass those back down to Mr. Boswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, at this time, we have two public hearings on the agenda tonight. The first public hearing is concerning the proposed text amendment to Article 8, Old and Historic District, Section 8-2-13, to add loft apartments in existing buildings or portions of existing buildings as a permitted use by right. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing for any comments that anyone would like to have regarding this proposed text amendment. If there is anyone from the public that would like to make any comments, we have made arrangements for them to personally appear here tonight. So again, I will ask at this time if anyone has any comments, and before that, ask Mr. Boswell if he'll just review this with us so that we're ready for it, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this proposed text amendment came about in the February meeting. We had a lengthy discussion about permitted uses for Subdistrict 13. We have at least two residential dwellings in Subdistrict 13 that could be utilized for some sort of residential dwelling. But there is no permitted use right now for Subdistrict 13. So that's kind of where we left it off. Planning Commission agreed to listen and possibly amend the code section for Subdistrict 13 to allow lofts in existing buildings.
All right. I've had two people sign in on the sign-in sheet to indicate that they would like to appear before the Planning Commission tonight. I don't know if Mr. Salyers or Mr. Baker, either of those are here that would like to talk with us in this particular public hearing or not.
I think one of the individuals that was signed up to speak, Mr. Chair, was for an issue that he was having at the country club that he wanted the Planning Commission to be made aware of. And then the other citizen that is here is for a situation that arose on Tanner Street.
Okay. So understanding as neither of them are here for the public hearing on this proposed text amendment.
That is correct.
All right. Having no one present to speak for or against or to discuss this matter, I'll now declare that the public hearing is closed, and I will open the conversation and discussion up to the members of the Planning Commission regarding this text amendment.
Mr. Chairman, maybe it'd be a good idea to have Jason or someone describe to us where the subsection 13 actually is in town.
Yes, Mr. Bradley, Sub-District 13 is located in the Depot Square area, Wall Street and Remsburg Drive. That area encompasses Mamma Mia's, the old Avenue Hotel or Avenue Mercantile, the train depot, Art Depot, and then across the tracks at what is known as Nancy's Fancies.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion regarding this proposed amendment? I'd be pleased to entertain any motions you would have to make in regards to the proposed text amendment.
I would move we approve it.
All right, a motion has been made by Mr. Bradley to approve it. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Sproles has seconded that motion. Any additional discussion? If not, Mr. Boswell, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Sproles,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Wilson,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mr. Schuman,
Aye.
Mr. Austin.
Aye. All right, that has been approved unanimously for that text amendment. The next public hearing that I have on the agenda tonight is a proposed text amendment to Article 8, Old and Historic District, Section 8-2-4, to add restaurants to Subdistrict 4 as a permitted use by right. This is a public hearing. At this time, I would like to declare that the public hearing is open and ask for any comments that anyone would like to make regarding the proposed text amendment.
Is this on 8-2-4 or 8-2-3? Because on my, what I've got, it shows restaurants and lofts on 8.2 or 8-2-3, but nothing on 8-2-4.
Yeah, it should be 8-2-4, which encompasses the courthouse hill over there where Rain and
Tanner.
that side of the street from Con to Tanner.
Well, what about the yellow marks on 8-2-3? We not dealing with that tonight?
She was just showing how across the street, that's what's allowed. I think that we had just highlighted that to show that they are allowed
Oh,
right
okay.
across the street, but they weren't on the other side of the
Okay.
street.
All right. I understand that neither of the people who have signed in are here to discuss anything about the proposed text amendments. Is that your understanding? Okay, all right. All right, since there is no one here to make any public comment in regards to it, I will declare at this time that the public hearing is closed, and I will now open it to members of the Planning Commission to have any discussion regarding this proposed text amendment. Hearing none, I will be pleased to entertain any motions that you might have regarding this.
I'll make a motion that we accept.
I'll second that.
All right, Mr. Anderson has made the motion. Mr. Schuman has seconded the motion to accept the proposed text amendment as written to add restaurants to this Subdistrict 4 as permitted use by right. Is there any additional discussion? If not, Mr. Boswell, we'll have a roll call vote on this, please.
Mr. Sproles,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Wilson,
Aye.
Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mr. Schuman,
Aye.
and Mr. Austin.
Aye. All right, that has passed unanimously. So that concludes the public hearings. The next matter on the agenda is a certificate, or an application rather, for a certificate of appropriateness. Thomas and Brenda Bundy, Post Office Box 423 in Abingdon, they are the owner. A certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of the Southwest Tobacco Warehouse, lots 1 and 2, which are located at 555 Russell Road, Abingdon, Virginia, tax map ID 104A-3-1. Mr. Boswell, would you go over and review this for us, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mr. and Mrs. Bundy have been taking a look at this piece of property for a while to possibly either redevelop. We had a discussion a couple months back. They decided that they wanted to totally remove the existing structures on the property to make it more sellable. It is consistent with the entrance corridor requirements. They have provided all the information that staff has asked for, and we've had several on-site visits with Mr. and Mrs. Bundy. And I think the ultimate goal is to sell the property in hopes that a developer will buy and redevelop it.
And is there a staff recommendation in
The staff
regard?
recommendation is we would love to see that building taken to the ground and the existing grade reestablished.
All right. Very good. Would anyone care to address the planning commission regarding this request for a certificate of appropriateness for the warehouse? You're welcome. You're not required to do so,
Well,
but
if
you're
you have any
welcome.
questions for us,
Would you state your name and your address, please?
I am Brenda Bundy, my husband is Thomas, and we are the owners of Southwest.
All right.
We live in Rosedale, but the address, I can't read with this. The address is Russell Road and Porterfield Highway, where the warehouse is.
All right. Thank you very much for being present tonight. Does anyone else have, or does anyone have any questions for them? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, is that all you need?
Yes, ma'am. If you'll wait just a minute, we're going to take action on this certificate of appropriateness. Is there any comments or questions from the planning commission? If not, are there any motions in regards to it?
I move we approve the certificate of appropriateness as submitted.
Mr. Shimon has moved that we approve the certificate of appropriateness. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Mr. Anderson seconded that motion. Any additional discussion? If not, Mr. Boswell, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Sproles,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wilson,
Somebody's on the train track.
Got some background noise.
They're requesting your vote, roll call vote, Mr. Wilson, on this motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness.
That's an aye from me, please.
Thank you.
thank you, sir. Mr. Bradley,
Aye.
Mr. Schuman,
Aye.
Mr. Austin.
Aye. All right, very good. That's been approved, folks. And again, thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda tonight is an application for certificate of appropriateness. Michael and Lori Noonkester, 1103 Empire Drive, Southwest Abingdon, Virginia, 24212, the owner. This is approval of the final plat. Total area of this subdivision is 3.28 acres, subdivided into 7 lots and located at 1103 Empire Drive, Southwest Abingdon, Virginia, tax map ID 106-7-18. Was he getting my attention that they're?
No, I was
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
Mr. Newcastle.
yeah. All right, Mr. Noonkester, we just called this matter. Mr. Boswell, would you go over and review this with us? I know we've had it on our agenda before.
Yes, sir. A couple months ago, Mr. Newcastle came in with a preliminary plat that was approved unanimously by the planning commission. The only thing that the planning commission asked was to make sure that there was a reference on the plat for a road maintenance agreement. VDOT has approved the road maintenance agreement along with the ability for Mr. Noonkastner to utilize a private drive to access 5 lots on the east side and 2 lots on the west side of the property. It's 3.28 acres in total that will be subdivided into 7 lots.
All right. Mr. Newcastle, would you like to address the planning commission? You're not required to do so, but you're welcome to.
Well, what I was gonna tell you is, my plans are is to build homes, single-family dwelling, and, we're gonna build like 1,200 square foot homes across it, so try to
Okay.
do something with it. It's been sitting there vacant for so many years, so. And actually, East Coast Cheerleading's building a building right now on the other side of me, so they bought a lot from us, so instead of a grown-up lot, it's gonna be finally finished, I hope.
Good.
Yep.
Good.
And I will add, sir, that is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The future land use designation would be residential. So we're happy to see that.
All right. Anyone have any questions of Mr. Newcastle? Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
All right, be pleased to entertain any motions in regards to this certificate of appropriateness.
I make a motion that we accept, this application for certificate of appropriateness
And to approve it.
and to approve it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Made a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Strollers has seconded that motion. Any additional discussion from the planning commission? If not, Mr. Boswell will have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Sproles.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Wilson. Mr. Bradley. Mr. Schuman.
Aye.
Mr. Austin.
Aye. Okay, certificate of appropriateness has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Newcastle, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, looks like we're going to move on to number 3. It's an application for a certificate of appropriateness, Marathon Realty Corporation, Post Office Box 1158 here in Abingdon, 24212. The owner is Waffle House Incorporated, Post Office Box 6450, Norcross, Georgia. Butch Bear is the representative. Certificate of appropriateness for approval of a new construction of 1,790 square feet, single-story building, enclosed masonry dumpster, parking lot, retaining wall with fence and lighting located at Cook Street, Abingdon, Virginia, tax map ID 021-8-9-A. Mr. Boswell, would you review this for us, please?
Yes, sir. Waffle House contacted staff and has been working with Marathon. The proposed building would be a 1,790 square foot, single-story building, enclosed masonry, dumpster, parking lot, retaining wall with fence and lighting. Staff has reviewed this in compliance with the restricted covenants that was with the agreement with Marathon and the town, and it is compliant with those restrictions for all the facade, the parking lot, the parking requirements. They actually have more parking than what's required, and everything is compliant with the restricted covenants.
Including the sign.
Yes, sir. The sign is the very first thing there.
Yeah, that's what I was
asking.
asking.
Yes, sir.
All right. Sir, would you like to address the planning commission on this request?
Only if there are any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Would you state your name, please, and your address for us?
Yes, sir. Butch Bauer, Waffle House, 5986 Financial Drive, Norcross, Georgia, 30071.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone have any questions of this gentleman? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any discussion from the planning commission? If not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion in regards to it.
I move we accept the certificate of appropriateness as submitted.
All right.
Hard to argue against the Waffle House at 10 after 6 on a Monday evening.
That's exactly right. Absolutely. All right, Mr. Schuman has moved for approval of this certificate of appropriateness. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll be glad to second that.
All right, Mr. Anderson beat you to it, Mr. Bradley, but we'll take his second to that. Is there any additional discussion regarding it? If not, Mr. Boswell, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Sproles.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Wilson.
Aye.
Mr. Bradley.
Aye.
Mr. Schuman,
Aye.
and Mr. Austin.
Aye. Okay, thanks,
you,
sir.
Mr.
The
sir.
certificate of appropriateness has been approved.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Now, I did not note when we began the meeting here today, but the agenda item of public comment was not listed on here.
Yep.
And I apologize for that, and I believe that both Mr. Salyers and Mr. Baker, are they here for public
Yes, sir.
comment?
Yes, sir, and I do apologize for that. It made it on the working agenda, but it did not make it on the agenda.
Well, that's no problem.
Now, I think Mr. Baker is here for number 4,
He is, yes, sir.
so.
Short-term rental, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll save him for a moment on short-term rental. And is Mr. Salyers here for something that is on the agenda or just general public
General
comment?
public comment.
All right, let's invite Mr. Salyers to come up. Mr. Salyers, good to see you tonight again. And
Nice to
if
see
you'll
you.
state your name and address for our record, please.
My name is Donnie Salyers. My address is 275 Bogey Drive, Abingdon, Virginia.
All right, sir, please make any comments you'd like to in regards to matters that the Planning Commission has interest in.
Well, I guess I don't know whether you'd be interested in this concerning the zoning of accessory buildings in Abingdon. I don't know whether that fits within your bailiwick or, but that's my concern.
Could you speak up a little bit, sir? I'm sorry.
It's hard to talk with the mask. My neighbor is put in the process of putting in a building now. He was originally given permission to put it up right near the road, which is a violation of the town ordinances and the covenants of the subdivision. What I'm suggesting is that that this organization redo its zoning laws concerning accessory buildings. The current building now is over top of power lines, which should never be allowed. It's my understanding the town is in the process of making them move it, but I still have concerns about where it's located. It's right beside of my house. It will devaluate the value of my property, and I think if we had proper zoning in this town on accessory buildings, that I wouldn't have this problem. I wouldn't have to get ready to file suit against my neighbor in order to have a decent neighborhood. And what I suggest is that you look at the Huntsville, Alabama zoning. They have some of the best zoning concerning accessory buildings. It would require it not to be in the front, but to be in the back. There's other things that they have in their zoning concerning having two-story buildings, things like that, not on power and sewer lines, et cetera. And that's my concern is I don't think the town has sufficient zoning to deal with accessory buildings.
Mr. Salyers, and of course I live in Country Club myself, but would not the restrictive covenants of the subdivision take care of that?
It would take care of my circumstances.
Right.
But it might not other residents that don't have restricted
see.
covenants in the town.
I understand.
I mean, I don't think the town really has authority to enforce the restrictive covenants,
They don't,
but
but you do.
I do. But there are other people that don't have the restricted covenants that it could present a problem for them.
Well stated, I understand that.
Well, and this is a good time to bring that up, because what we're talking about is some other issues with zoning in different areas. So it's a good time for the folks doing that zoning.
Yes, we're looking at
matrix to look at
updating
that.
the entire zoning subdivision ordinance, so it's definitely something that we'll make note of and look at best practices, Mr. Sires.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention, and as stated, we will take that into consideration as we're going through these ordinances and
I would
trying
su-
to make some changes.
I would suggest looking at Huntsville ordinances. They seem to have one of the better ones for
Right.
that particular
Right.
aspect.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. All right, other than Mr. Baker, is there anyone else remaining to address the planning commission tonight?
Just
Okay.
the two, sir.
Good. All right, let's move to the discussion items. And let's talk about, to review and discuss the proposed amendment of Article 21 signs.
Now, is this,
Mr. Baker.
well, let's see, do we wanna do that before we do?
However, Mr. Chairman wants to.
That's fine. Mr. Baker's here. He's on number 4, is that correct? All right, there's a matter on here for general discussion concerning short-term rentals in B1, B2, and B3 business districts. Mr. Baker, if you'd state your full name and address for us, please, for our record.
How you doing, Mr. Austin?
I'm doing well. Good to see you tonight.
You as well. Robert Blake Baker, and I'm at 239 Valley Street, Northeast, Abingdon, Virginia.
All right, just have at it and tell us what your thoughts are in regards to the short-term rental issues and what the issues are, please.
Yes, sir. Well, found out in the purchase of a property there at 313 Tanner, right across from the fire station, that it was not zoned for short-term rental, even though it had been practicing as such legally with an approved, I guess, business license that I found out from Mr. Boswell was in error. So what I'm requesting to rectify that situation, and apparently every other short-term rental that is within the B1, B2, or B3 zones, I'm requesting that there'll be a, instead of changing the by rights zoning verbiage, that we go with a special use permit to allow short-term rentals in those zones. That could be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by the planning commission.
All right. Anything else you'd like to bring to our attention about that?
I like it pretty quick.
Have any questions of Mr. Baker in regards to his thoughts?
That's the only, business on Tanner Street, isn't it? I mean, the house, that's the only house, that's on Tanner Street, because the next, would be, Main Street with the, Muncie property, wouldn't it?
Right.
And I don't see how we can not allow this, with that's the only property there. They, I think it should be allocated to him, even though, because previously it was permitted for the other family to use as a bed and breakfast.
Well, one point, Mr. Anderson, it's not just on Tanner. That zone for B1 extends all the way up to Valley and then goes back towards exit 19 quite a ways. So
Right.
it's not just that one little
Well, I know
block.
the part I live up off of Tanner on B, but it's no place, it's just one house on Tanner that way.
All right.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that that happened,
Yeah.
Mr. Baker, that it was, that a business license was issued for that piece of property. The business license was issued as a homestay. Homestay was brand new. Most localities in Virginia at that time, I think we were the third town in the entire Commonwealth that had adopted a homestead ordinance. And we were getting calls after we adopted from other localities, Alexandria, Blacksburg, which we took their ordinance from them asking us how we were, going about enforcing it. The homestay ordinance it's a beast in itself, and it's super restrictive. But in that instance, it was issued. It shouldn't have been, and there is no permitted use or special use to allow Mr. Baker to utilize that piece of property now that he's purchased it. Staff doesn't have any issue with the planning commission taking a look at, I've had Mr. Gregg put together some information from other localities that allow this type of use in their commercial districts. Your B districts are essentially mixed-use districts anyway. You have residential mixed with some sort of commercial or industrial use to begin with. I don't have any issues. Staff doesn't have any issues. We'd like to look a little bit more in depth in it and see if, that's something that isn't going to affect our hotel owners and things of that nature. But personally, staff doesn't have any issues with allowing this in commercial districts.
as I understand it, there are a number or more than one short-term rentals in B1, which is relatively small. But
B1 is only-
B2 and B3 are bigger.
Yes, sir.
It would be my suggestion, having spoken with Mr. Baker and spoken, is that we think about having short stay rentals as a by right in B1, but in B2 and B3, which are bigger and which we really don't know all, I would suggest maybe that those be done through special use permits.
You're kind of going the opposite of what best practice zoning is asking for, your lower density uses, which is your B1. If you were gonna do special use in B1 for short term, then you could allow those as permitted uses as the density goes up to B2, B3. So anything allowed in B1 should automatically be, in a perfect world, the way that our zoning ordinance will look eventually. Everything allowed in B1 will be allowed in B2 plus additional uses.
Well, I guess the reason I'm saying that is, when we're looking at redoing all that, do we want to suggest all that as being by right now? And the reason I say that about B2 and B3, particularly B2, is there are more properties in B2, some of which, in some areas in B2, may really not be conducive to having short stay rentals, whereas B1 is so small that that's not going to be an issue. My concern would be in B2 and B3, and I'd like to solve Mr. Baker's problem, but I also want to make sure that when we solve that problem, that we don't give, when we do that as a by right in B2, if we did that, I think we'd be giving renters a view that it was, all of those areas were actually conducive to short-term rental. And my looking at B2, I don't know if that's the case. Now, you may feel better about that than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable saying, at the staff level that we think that it should be an allowed use.
In all those conditions.
Right, yes, sir. Well, again, if you're gonna allow it in B1 as a by right use, then the other higher densities, your B2 and your B3, Mr. Baker's properties in B2, you would want to allow it as a by right use as well, because it should be everything that's in that B1. And then, B2 encompasses pretty much all of Main Street. It's your biggest commercial district in the entire town. You've got a small section of B1 on Park Street, then you have a small section of B3 after you exit the historic district there at what used to be El Soda Shop, it's Greco's now.
Mhm.
That section is B3 right around until you get to Gibson's Auto Dome. So those are two very small portions. Your B2 is your biggest district, but I think it's conducive for a mixed use. It is essentially a mixed use district, so not allowing short-term rentals doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I'm not suggesting we don't allow it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder about if there are areas there where it would be, in terms of public safety, better to say that it should be a special use. If you tell me that you feel comfortable that's not the case, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation is, if you're going to allow it, or you're going to take a look at amending it, I say you have to allow it in all of them. Because right now, they're operating right now, and some of them probably are operating illegally that we have not been able to enforce, but we know that they're operating.
Oh, yeah.
Could I suggest that staff just review this and make a recommendation back to us as to how logistically we can handle it? I think we all want to handle it in some fashion, but if you will just have everyone review that and then put it back on our next agenda with recommendation.
Yes, sir, sure will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, appreciate it. Nice to see you this
Mr.
evening.
Austin, thank you, sir. Thank you, guys.
All right, let's go back to number 1 here. This is a review and a discussion of the proposed amendment of Article 21, signs. Mr. Boswell.
I'm going to try to be as brief as I possibly can.
Let me interrupt you. Mr. Bradley, we're picking up a lot of background noise. Do you mind to mute your mic until you get ready to speak? That might help us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, we have been working with the consulting group, the Berkeley Group, on amending the entire sign ordinance. That directive was given to staff by council. Council felt as if the sign ordinance was too cumbersome, hard to enforce, and very restrictive. So we gave all that information and all staff feedback and our concerns to the consultant. And the consultant has submitted a draft ordinance of best practices. They have taken all the best practices from zoning and planning and looked at other localities and how localities of our size, and not all are in the same type of unique location, being that we have an interstate that runs through half of our town, a major interstate at that. But they did look at all those factors and submitted us with a draft ordinance to amend the entire sign ordinance. Now, having said that, and I'll take an excerpt from the Berkeley Group's analysis. It says the town's current sign ordinance has many provisions that would not withstand scrutiny from following the recent Reed v. Town of Gilbert Supreme Court decision, which limited the locality's ability to enforce content-based regulations in the sign ordinance. The Berkeley Group has provided a draft sign ordinance that should be adopted following Planning Commission and Town Council review to ensure that the town's regulations are legally defensible in light of this ruling. The draft sign ordinance includes new content-neutral definitions and reorganizes the sign code for ease of administration and interpretation. The draft language also corrects administrative issues identified by staff, such as the method of calculating sign area. I mean, right now, our sign ordinance doesn't even it tells me that we should be calculating the area of the sign, but it doesn't tell you how to do that, specifically for wall-mounted signs. So the draft that you have before you in the packet, there's a lot of it that we kept, that we asked to be kept when we were dealing with the consultant, and they left some of that stuff in, but the stuff that was content-based, that was essentially illegal after the ruling of Reed v. Town of Gilbert, they addressed all of that. And staff and administration and the town attorney have reviewed the document and feel like, we feel like we did a pretty good job on it. And we had started prior to bringing the Berkeley Group on, trying to do it with another firm, Mount Rogers Planning District Commission, and it was just too much. So we hired the consulting firm, and I think they've given us a pretty good ordinance.
Yeah, I read it over now, it does specify the amount of square footage, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah, what it's done is it has, they've actually combined all the districts, and they've given each, and you can see it here if I can get the computer to work. Instead of having a language, the Berkeley Group has put it into, and this is a common theme across the Commonwealth now. Pictures and graphs are a good thing when the public is looking at these ordinances. So what they've done is they've put it in a table, and they've broken it down into different sections. Like this is the AFOS, Agricultural, Forest, Soil, and Open Space District, and it gives every type of sign type that's permitted, the uses, residential or non-residential, and what those regulations are, how many they can have, and how big the maximum sign area can be, which is fantastic for staff and for the public. We get a lot of calls during the week, and people are super sensitive about their signage. It's one of those things that they really want what they can get out of their sign. So this will really help staff and the public as far as wanting to know what the regulations are and being able to see it in black and white and say, well, there it says I can have a freestanding sign. It's a non-residential use. It can be 25 square feet.
Well, it cleared up a lot of that confusion with temporary signs too that we talked about, because that was all, when I read that, I thought, gosh, this is a lot clearer than what we had been looking at, because those temporary signs, it was hard to tell what was actually temporary versus permanent, and they,
Yes, sir, yeah.
I thought they did a really good job
They
with that
did,
thing.
they did. And you had two sections that, references temporary signs, a temporary sign section, and another section that was signs which do not need a permit. Well, it was essentially the same language, but it confused people and,
It was very confusing, we talked about it.
yeah, so this is a first step to the complete overhaul of our zoning ordinance, and I think, it's a step in the right direction, Mr. Chairman.
All right, very good. So the next would be to advertise this for public hearing, is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
One thing it did do, it had the old name for the Historic Preservation Board.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that's,
Oh, you talking about the Board of Architectural Review? That's probably getting ready to be the Board of Architectural Review.
again?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
It was never adopted.
oh, okay.
It was something that was changed internally, and the council never approved it.
Oh.
Do you need action from the planning commission asking that this be publicized and public hearing
Yes, sir,
and
Mr.
advertised?
Chairman, if you'd be so kind.
All right, is there a motion to do that?
I'll say move.
Mr. Schuman has moved that we ask that this be advertised for public hearing. A second?
I second.
Mr. Anderson has seconded. Any additional discussion? All right, if not, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. All right, next is Abington subdivision ordinance diagnostic matrix. Mr. Boswell?
Mr. Chairman, this was the second effort by the Berkeley Group when we hired them as the consultant. This was part of the package. There were two separate deliverables, the sign ordinance amendments and revisions, and then the Berkeley Group, let me get to it, Mr. Chairman. The Berkeley Group went through the town's entire zoning and subdivision ordinance, and in a nutshell, and because I can't breathe, have basically told us where we're in compliance with state code and where we are not. And if you go through this, they give a brief analysis and overview saying that the purpose and scope was to better position the town of Abington for a future ordinance update. The town commissioned a study to examine its primary land use ordinances for compliance with the Code of Virginia and other best practices. The Berkeley Group, a Virginia-based local government consulting firm, was retained by the town and given the following task. We asked them to analyze the zoning and subdivision regulations. We asked them to provide best practice recommendations along with recommendations for alignment with applicable town policy documents, including the comprehensive plan and other policies as directed by staff. Incorporate known ordinance strengths and weaknesses as provided by town staff knowledgeable with the zoning and subdivision regulations, and develop a draft ordinance language for content-neutral sign ordinance. So in this matrix, as you go down through here and see, and they've done a fantastic job on this. The computer will work. We're getting there, I promise you. Okay, so what they've done is, they've gone in and they have listed the Virginia Code section, and then the intent of that section. Is the town in compliance with that section, and is the existing, they give the existing zoning ordinance section, whether it's in compliance or not. And then they've given their comments and recommendations. So you can see, number one, Virginia section 15.2, 2204, advertising of plans. We're in partial compliance, not in full compliance. There is no reference to that section of the state code in our existing zoning ordinance. And their recommendation is to update it to reference that state code section. And they have gone through our entire zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance to do that. And one of the key things I think to take away from it is that the Berkeley group is saying that it's too complicated, it's too convoluted. We need to combine our zoning and our subdivision ordinance into one ordinance. And we need to simplify it, but make sure that we're in compliance with the state code sections.
So are they continuing to work on this to
Well,
send a full proposal to us?
We will start that process after July 1, when the new budget rolls out.
Okay.
I have been appropriated by the council to start the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance update. So I wanted you all to be aware to see how out of compliance we actually are currently, but we're moving forward to getting this rectified and having an update.
You know, when I read that, through that, the idea of making it simpler is, you know, just like the sign thing, you could get into some of those, and we have in our meetings, and people are confused, and we're confused, and
Right.
Split hairs to no end, really.
Yeah, yeah, we're, it's been a while since there's been a really comprehensive update of our codes, and it's past time. And, it'll make the life of the staff easier, it'll make the planning commission, lives easier, and hopefully the town council.
well, I know it was discussed when I was in my first stint on the planning commission, and staff was trying to do it, and it just was not.
It's too
not-
daunting
yeah,
for an
it's just too
in-house
much.
project. I mean, you've got to have the people that are devoted to looking up these code sections and writing the language and making sense of it. And, there's just no way that we can do that in-house.
All right, is there any additional discussion regarding either the subdivision or the zoning diagnostic matrix that we've discussed? All right, carry forward. We'll look forward to that. Old matters or matters that are not on the agenda that members of the Planning Commission would like to discuss. Announcements?
When is the next meeting? Is it the 22nd?
I'm looking at that right now. Sheena. Yes, sir, it'll be the 22nd. And we may not have enough time to advertise the signed ordinance for the June 22nd meeting, so we may have to postpone that until the July meeting. I'm gonna try my best to get it on there, but I think they need it at least. The deadline may be June 3rd, so if I can get it in there by June 3rd, it'll be on the next agenda. If not, it'll be in July.
All right.
I do have one more thing to bring up, Mr. Chairman, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
sir, please.
Mr. Morani has been taken off of the planning commission. So we will be looking to fill that seat. And where the town manager in the town code, is the secretary of the planning commission, he can delegate that authority to another member of staff. And he wants to delegate that to Miss Janice Dornan, my administrative assistant. She's already taken the minutes and being the secretary anyway, just try to make it official.
Very good.
Thanks, sir.
All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, jump up and get out of here. Thank you.
You say you're
Mr.
having.
Wilson, Mr. Brown.